Touch these 5 spots, and you will awaken desire in any man. Carl Jung. There are women who awaken, and there are women who merely brush past. The difference isn't in their hands, but in their intention. Because a deep man doesn't ignite with empty gestures. He burns when someone dares to discover the places no one else has. Do you want to know why they ignore you? Why don't they desire you like before? It's not your age. It's not your appearance. It's that you don't know how to awaken what truly matters. And as long as you think desire is born only in bed, you'll keep spinning in frustration, invisible. Today, I'll reveal 5 places a man longs to be touched, though he'll never admit it. Places that activate his mind, his body, and his soul. The last one is the most transformative of all, but also the most challenging if you don't know how to channel it. This is a revelation for those who are tired of being invisible. Stay until the end. You'll understand truths no one has ever revealed to you, and that he'll never confess to. Have you ever touched a man and nothing happened? No spark, no different look, not even a subtle change in his breathing. Just that uncomfortable silence that makes it clear what you did didn't resonate. I'll tell you why. Because you touched where everyone else touches, but he doesn't need it. That's the problem. You're trying to crack a safe with the same combination you used 30 years ago, and none of that works anymore. Let's go to the first point, the lower back. It's where his armor begins to fade. It's no coincidence that right there, precisely there, the weight of the years accumulates. Not just physical fatigue, but emotional exhaustion too. A man who has lived, who has supported a family, who has faced disappointments and made decisions that drained him. He doesn't need hands that touch him without purpose. He needs to be touched by a presence that says, I'm here and I see you. Picture this. He's in front of you, fixing something at home, answering emails, and immersed in the same routine that always surrounds him. You approach without saying a word and place your hand on the curve of his lower back. Not abruptly, not with obvious desire, but with firmness and respect. A gesture that doesn't seek sex, but presence. And in that moment, if done right, something shifts. Not because you're arousing him, but because you're speaking to his collective unconscious. As Jung would say, you're reminding him that someone still sees him as a man. That someone notices what everyone else overlooks. But don't get confused. This isn't magic. It's not about touching just to touch. It's about being there, letting your energy transmit what your words no longer can. The lower back is a zone that cries out without a voice, and only the women who've stopped seeking validation can hear that call. Want proof? Think of the last time a man shivered just from a touch on his waist. It's probably been so long you don't even associate it with anything tangible. Because you've lived believing that intense gestures, bold words, or bedroom games are what keep desire alive. But no, it's the detail, the pause, and the touch that say, I didn't come to use you, I came to behold you. Touch him there with intention, not expecting anything in return. Do it, knowing that this small gesture could be the beginning of a new kind of connection, a way to rebuild something that once seemed lost. And if you do it right, if you do it without rush, you'll see it's not the skin you're touching. It's his shadow, as Jung would call it. His story, his struggle, and his need to be seen by someone who doesn't treat him as a provider, a father, or a friend, but as a whole man. This is how desire begins to awaken, not from the flesh, but from the soul. And that, my friend, is something few understand and almost no one dares to teach. Second point, the touch that revives what's been forgotten. If you understood what I said earlier, then you already know that desire doesn't ignite from the surface. It ignites when you touch with purpose. When you make a man feel that there's still fire beneath the ashes. And that fire isn't stoked by the obvious, but by the forgotten. We've arrived at the second key point. The inner part of the arm. The touch that revives what has been forgotten. Because there, where few look, lies one of the most powerful zones for creating emotional and physical connections. But since it's not visible and not named, most people ignore it. And that ignorance is costing you his desire. The inner part of the arm is an area that, according to neuropsychology, is full of highly sensitive nerve endings. But that's secondary. What truly matters is that this point is deeply tied to emotional memory. Yes, the memory of affection, the one that holds the first tender touches, caring gestures, sincere caresses, and someone who wasn't seeking anything but presence. When you touch that area with gentleness and firmness, you're not seducing him like an anxious teenager. You're activating buried archetypes. As Jung would say, you're telling him without words, I can touch you without expecting anything in return, simply because you deserve to be touched. Now think about this. How many times do you think a mature man has been caressed without expectations? How many times has someone placed a hand on him just to remind him that he's still alive, still worthy of unconditional affection? Very few, because with age, touch becomes mechanical or disappears. The women around him stop touching him with curiosity. They see him as a father, a friend, and a support figure, but not as a man. And that destroys more than time ever could. That withers the root of desire. From Stoicism comes a powerful idea. You can't control how others perceive you, but you can control the value you give to small acts. Touching the inner arm is a subtle act, but one full of intention. It's a decision to be present, and that decision, when done right, has the power to restore what seemed lost. A man who receives that touch doesn't think, she's seducing me. He thinks, she's reminding me that I'm valuable, that I still have something to offer, that there's still beauty in me. That kind of touch doesn't demand or pressure. It simply exists, but its impact is deep because it activates an ancestral need to feel valued. It tells him, without words, that someone sees him without judging his age, his scars, or his battles. And when a man feels that, he transforms. He stops putting up walls. He lets his guard down. He starts looking at you differently. Not because you're promising anything, but because you're giving back something he thought he'd lost. His right to be desired. The great mistake is believing that desire is triggered by lingerie, by promises, or by beautiful words. No. Desire awakens when you touch where others don't dare to, when you dare to be different, when you understand that the body is not just skin, it's a story, and that every gesture, every touch can be the key that opens a forgotten door. So the next time you're with him, don't look for the shortcut. Place your hand on that inner part of his arm. Don't say anything. Just stay there, present, feeling. And if you do it right, you'll notice it not in his immediate reaction, but in his breathing. In that way, he starts looking at you differently, in that subtle tremor that reveals something inside him has awakened. And that's where the real thing begins. Not sex, not conquest, but real connection. The kind that lasts, the kind that transforms, the kind that very few women ever manage to create. Third point, where vulnerability becomes surrender. You already know that touching is not the same as connecting, and a poorly executed caress without intention is worse than doing nothing at all. We've already talked about the lower back and the inner arm, but now we come to a point many ignore because they don't dare to explore what they don't understand. We've arrived at the third point, the edge of the jaw. where vulnerability becomes surrender. This spot isn't just sensitive physically. It's sensitive because it symbolizes both power and fragility. It's an exposed area close to the eyes, the neck, the mouth. Touching there is like saying, "I'm so close I could hurt you, but I choose to protect you." And do you know what that does to a mature man? It gives him back the ability to trust. It reminds him that he can let his guard down without being invaded. Because the edge of the jaw is not caressed as if you're trying to speed things up. It's caressed as if someone had all the time in the world. Like someone who doesn't need to rush, because she already understands that true desire lives not in urgency, but in stillness. Here's a practical strategy that can completely change the way you relate to a man who's lived. The next time you're having a calm conversation with him, don't interrupt with romantic words or hints. Just lean in slowly and rest your finger lightly on the edge of his jaw. Look into his eyes. Don't smile, just look. Hold that gesture for a few seconds, then slowly remove your hand. Say nothing. Return to the conversation as if nothing happened. Did you feel that? That is power. Not because you're manipulating, but because you're present. Because that gesture communicates something no compliment ever could. That you hold power, but you don't use it to dominate. You use it to protect. It tells him you don't need to prove anything. You're just there. And if he wants to stay, he can. This kind of touch breaks a pattern, because most women are waiting for the right moment, the perfect timing to kiss, to caress, to say something that works. But the women who truly awaken desire don't wait for moments. They create them. And this touch on the jaw is not a technique. It's a silent declaration. You're telling him he can surrender without fear. Because you're not there to take advantage of him. You're there to perceive him as a whole, with his wounds and his strengths. Fourth point, the place he never expected you to notice. If you've made it this far, you already understand that touching the body without touching the soul is like lighting a candle in a room full of dust. It barely lights up and it dies out. Genuine connection isn't built with generic phrases or memorized techniques. It's built through presence, intention, and deep understanding. But there's a silent, almost invisible mistake that can destroy all progress, even when you think you're doing everything right. Let's talk about the fourth point, behind the knees, the place he never expected you to notice. This area, forgotten by nearly everyone, is a perfect metaphor for what happens when we ignore what isn't visible. Behind the knees lies a sensitivity that doesn't respond to logic or immediate desire. It represents what's been left behind, what's not shown, what's deemed unimportant. And here's the mistake, thinking that only what's visible matters. That is only what he shows you that needs to be touched. Many women get caught up in the obvious. They want to change their lives from the surface, improving their looks, speaking differently, pretending to be confident. But they leave the deeper layers untouched. Just like that part behind the knees, sensitive, overlooked, and vulnerable. The mental trap is this: believing that if something isn't mentioned, it doesn't exist. That if a man doesn't ask to be touched there, it means nothing. That if you don't understand the value of something, then it must not be valuable. And so, you go on avoiding the uncomfortable, the things you don't know how to handle. This is why many women fail in relationships. They try to change the outside while staying the same inside. And the man senses it not through words, but through his body, through his silence, through that distance you can't seem to cross. When you touch behind his knees, you're sending a message no other woman has dared to express. That you care even about what he himself has forgotten. That you're not just there for what's easy, what's shiny, or what gives instant gratification. You're there for what truly matters. And in the mind of a mature man, That's revolutionary, because most have already given up. They've stopped expecting that kind of attention. They've grown used to being invisible in the deepest parts of their bodies and souls. Jung would call it the encounter with the shadow, that rejected part we all carry inside. The consequences of ignoring this are devastating. You don't just lose his desire, you lose his respect. Because he knows when you're improvising. He knows when your gestures come from a script, not from intention. And that's when you become just another woman. Another one who didn't know how to touch where it hurts, where it vibrates, where life still lingers. Touching behind the knees isn't an erotic act. It's proof that you're willing to explore what others don't see. And if you do it right, if you reach that place with the same natural grace you'd use to touch his face, then something deep begins to shift, not just in him, but in you. Because you train yourself to see what no one else sees, to value what others overlook. You begin to see your own life differently too. You begin to notice everything you've ignored in yourself. Your fears, your repressed emotions, your desire to be touched with respect, with curiosity, with presence. So don't be fooled. What may seem like a simple spot on the body is actually a portal to the soul. And that portal only opens to those unafraid to face the invisible, to those who aren't seeking quick results, but deep transformation. Fifth and final point, the connection that transcends the body. We've reached the final point in this journey, and if you've truly listened to everything so far, you already know this isn't about seduction techniques. It's about reconnecting with something many have already given up on: self-respect. This fifth point isn't just a place on the body. It's a symbol of everything you've been ignoring: the scalp, the connection that transcends the body. And if you don't understand what it represents, you'll stay trapped on the surface, believing that desire is physical, when, in truth, it's mental, emotional, and spiritual. Jung would call it the point of contact with the animus, the masculine energy every woman carries within. Touching a man's scalp isn't the same as running your fingers through his hair. It's touching the root of his inner world, the place where thoughts, tension, and doubt accumulate. It's silently telling him, I don't just desire your body, I desire your mind, and I'm willing to hold it with care. But not everyone can do this, because when it is done poorly, it feels invasive, awkward, and uncomfortable. Done right, though, it requires complete presence. It requires being the kind of woman who's not afraid of silence, because her fingers do the speaking. And here lies the problem. Most women can't stand silence. They crave instant results. They want him to react, to give them a sign, some kind of validation. And when they don't get it, they grow frustrated, pull away, or worse, victimize themselves. They say, I did everything right, and he didn't even look at me. They don't understand that desire isn't awakened through pressure, but through patience. That touching the scalp isn't meant to arouse, but to connect, to make him feel that someone finally can hold him without asking for anything in return. But if you keep looking for shortcuts, you'll end up like so many others, frustrated, confused, not understanding why he keeps shutting down. The reason is simple. It's not that he can't feel anymore, it's that he doesn't trust anymore. And with your impatience, with your need to get something back, you confirm what he already fears. That opening up isn't worth it. That no woman truly understands the value of deep connection. The scalp, when touched with intention, triggers the release of oxytocin, the hormone of trust. And if you can make him feel that with you, without sex, without manipulation, then you're touching what truly matters. But it's not easy. It requires a different mindset. You have to stop acting like an emotional beggar, waiting for him to validate your existence. You have to start moving like a woman who is already whole, because only from that fullness Can you touch without needing, without anxiety, without urgency? That's the difference between women who awaken desire and those who don't, and those who only awaken pity. Changing this pattern doesn't start with changing your gestures. It begins by changing your intention, by understanding that if you're not ready to touch with your soul, it's better not to touch at all. Because men sense it not through their skin, but through energy. And if you're empty inside, he'll feel it. So transform. But do it for real, not with promises, not with pretty words, but with presence, patience, and respect. And if you don't know where to begin, start with this. The next time you're with him, stay silent. Get close. Place your hand gently on his head. Stay there. Breathe calmly. Don't look for a reaction. Just remain. Because of that, one simple, sincere gesture can awaken something in him no one else has ever reached his desire to trust again. And when that happens, get ready. Because you won't just be touching a man. You'll be touching what Jung would call his self, his deepest essence. And that's where the real begins. That's where true desire is born.